You're watching CNN News 18. My name is Toya Singh. We're right here on the morning show. Our focus right now is actually on Taiwan, which has emerged as we speak as the front line in a geopolitical showdown. We'll tell you a little bit more about it because as we speak, amid multiple threats and warnings from China, United States House Representative Nancy Pelosi met the president of Taiwan a few hours ago. Pelosi assured extended support to the country on all fronts, be it security, economy, or governance. Pelosi also urged the world to recognize Taiwan's leadership and choose democracy over autocracy. Remember, China claims the self-ruled island of Taiwan as its own. Taiwan, historically, over the last few decades, has argued that it is its own independent state. Taiwan President lauded Pelosi for her Taiwan friend. She's also termed the U.S. as a devoted friend in that message. Meanwhile, irked by the U.S. Speaker's visit, China's begun trade sanctions. It's also taken a number of military steps. We're going to take a much deeper dive into each of these developments. But first, I want to take you to what Nancy Pelosi had to say. Take a look.
Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, both sides of the aisle, united in our support for Taiwan. And now, more than ever, America's solidarity with Taiwan is crucial, and that is the message we are bringing here today. When we travel and leave the country as a congressional delegation, security, to protect our people as well as global security, economy to spread prosperity in our own country and others, and governance are three principal pillars of our travel. In all three areas, we have great cooperation and friendship with Taiwan, and we value that.
Speaker Pelosi is truly one of Taiwan's most devoted friends. Facing deliberately heightened military threats, Taiwan will not back down. We will firmly uphold our nation's sovereignty and continue to hold the line of defense for democracy. We will continue to work with the U.S. Congress as well as the administration to strengthen cooperation in areas such as Indo-Pacific security, economic development, talent cultivation, and supply chains so as to further elevate Taiwan-U.S. relations.
All right, the fear, remember, over here is that when China escalates, as it has over the last few hours, if even a slight accident occurs, the low trust between both sides could create more issues between Taiwan and China. Now, my colleague Abhishek Jha with us this morning on the phone to bring us more context on this entire story. Abhishek, we're starting the day with you. So if you could inform our audiences about a few things. Question one, what is Taiwan's own history? What makes it such a sour point for both China and the United States? If you could tell us first about that, and in the context of that, then tell us more about Pelosi's visit.
So China and Taiwan, they have a long history. In 1949, when People's Republic of China, or the People's Liberation Army, which kind of captured whole of China, and a communist ruling were established. Then the Kuomintang Party, which was the party who was ruling erstwhile China before PLA sort of liberated China, they were all reduced to this island nation of Taiwan, which was called then Formosa, but now it is called Taiwan. So almost 75 years of history, 74 years of history they have, and since then Chinese side has been ruled by communist ruling setup. While democratically elected government have been there in Taiwan in the last 7 decades, the freedom of expression, the kind of human rights. So mostly the Taiwanese island, they espouse the values that Western Bloc or the USA also supports. In fact, all the democratically elected government supports globally. So that sort of establishment, ruling, and the order is in Taiwan, which is of course not something that China likes, because China still thinks that Taiwan was not captured by the PLA way back 1949, does still fall under the sovereignty of Chinese side. And over the several decades, nations across the globe have finally realized the practical aspect of having diplomatic ties with China, and hence mostly the diplomatic engagements with the Taiwanese side has been limited to trade and economics. no high-level official diplomatic delegation from a country of importance, if we say in the global arena, is there with the Taiwanese side. So no bilateral high-level diplomatic engagement happens between most of the nations globally and Taiwan, and mostly the diplomatic ties are established with Chinese side, and most of the nations believe in one China policy, including India, USA, Indo-Pacific nations. So every nation have accepted the fact that there is one China, and there are different ruling type in various blocks of China. If you talk about Hong Kong, Taiwan, or other small island nation that China claims its sovereignty over them. So this has been the historical context of Chinese relationship. But now we know that China has been aggressively trying to become a superpower, both in terms of economic, trade, and also in terms of military strength. And for that, it needs to push its limit. For that, it needs to express its strength in and around China. We know how stressful is the environment if we talk about the defense and security in terms in South China Sea and East China Sea. We have also seen incursion and aggression from Chinese side on India's northern border. There has been stress already with from Chinese side on Japanese island of Senkaku. So in all these contexts, China is trying to portray itself as one of the superpower in terms of military strength. And if it has to portray itself in that way, it has to place itself in that way. Taiwan is one of the bone of contention, which defying all Chinese threat and warning is still rules by its own law, governed by democratically elected government. There is freedom of expression, human rights are all kind of protected as per the UN laws. So this is something is not digestible to the Chinese side, and hence they don't allow or they don't want any other global nation globally to have direct diplomatic engagement with China. And this visit of Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan is clearly in violation of, we say in Chinese concept of sovereignty that they feel that they have over the Taiwanese island.
Okay, Abhishek, in a few minutes I'm going to come back to you because I want to ask you more about how the Taiwan public has responded, what indications we might have, not just the government but also the public. But we'll come back to you in a few minutes to ask you about that. Right now I believe we have the analyst Shashank Sareen with us. He's a political analyst. He'll give us a lot more context to the story. Sir, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on CNN News 18. Sir, multiple reports describe the United States relationship, particularly towards Taiwan, as one of strategic ambiguity. That's the term you'll come about again and again. Could you give our audiences more context on exactly what that means? Could you also tell us, sir, when it comes to Nancy Pelosi's visit, one of the things we know is that Joe Biden, the US president, had said that the military does not advise this at the time. Why then do we see Pelosi push the envelope in this way?
Look, to take the second question first, I don't think, the House of Representatives Speaker has decided to go to Taiwan on her own volition. She suddenly got an idea that she wants to poke the Chinese in the eye and that she's going to go to Taiwan to make a statement. These are not things which happen just like that. I would imagine that this was part of a well thought out move to signal certain things to China from the American side, and everybody would have been in the loop to some extent. So that is as far as the Pelosi visit is concerned. But on the issue of strategic ambiguity, I think the way the Americans have proceeded, and this is from the time when their relations with China were restored, the Chinese insisted at that point of time. You have to look at the context of that period. There was this Cold War raging between the Soviet Union and the United States. The Soviet Union, or the erstwhile Soviet Union, and which was part of the Russian Empire at that point of time. That was the principal contradiction. That was the principal challenge before the United States. And China, despite being a communist country, was something which the U.S. could have used to counter the Russian influence or the Soviet influence. For that reason, the Chinese insisted that the Americans accept the one China policy. At that point of time, the Americans downgraded their relations with Taiwan and accepted the One China policy. That is now coming into question. So the Americans had some kind of an alliance arrangement also with Taiwan to protect Taiwan against Chinese aggression. That wasn't exactly junked, but that was also never really owned up, in unambiguous terms. So in a sense, nobody was very sure that if the Chinese were to make any aggressive move vis-a-vis Taiwan, would the Americans remain committed as part of its arrangement with Taiwan to protect Taiwanese sovereignty, although I use the term sovereignty somewhat loosely in this particular case, because both China as well as Taiwan believe in One China policy. The only difference is that the Chinese want the One China policy under Beijing, while somebody like me supports One China policy provided the system which is there in Taiwan is also there in mainland China. And so that strategic ambiguity has actually in some ways served the Americans well. They were able to build up relations with China without necessarily affecting either the security or the stability of Taiwan or the prosperity of Taiwan. And that strategic ambiguity remains even today. The Americans have issued warnings. They are saying we are not going to let anything happen to Taiwan, but there is no real, there's no real clarity on how far the Americans are going to go in the defense of Taiwan. So that ambiguity is there, and that keeps the Chinese also, guessing as to what exactly the Americans will do. And they don't want to do something which, turns completely awry, like has happened in the case of Ukraine and Russia. So I think that strategic ambiguity has served the Americans well until now. How long that will happen and whether there needs to be a certain degree of clarity now on what the next steps are going to be, that is something which the Americans will have to decide.
Okay, and so one more aspect I want to ask you about is that in the last few hours, almost in retaliation to Pelosi's announcement, you've watched Beijing launch a number of drills. And a lot of analysts say that these drills should simply be looked at as a show of strength rather than a precursor to any kind of actual invasion on Taiwan. So, A, I want to ask you if you agree with that analysis. And then B, I wanted to ask you if you could put all of these Chinese movements in context to the Chinese political scene, where we're seeing that possibly President Xi Jinping could come in for a third term in a few months from now.
Look, as far as the Chinese drills are concerned, I find them laughable. I can understand that what they're trying to do is a show of force. They're trying to intimidate the other countries. They're trying to signal that they are incensed by this particular visit. And they are doing all this muscle flexing. But at the end of the day, it's like one of those comical scenes that there's somebody who's seeing something happen which he doesn't like, and, he's probably boxing himself to make the other person, to intimidate the other person. So if the Chinese want to make a fool of themselves, I think they are welcome to do it. But I think their bluff has been called. They were very shrill, they were very strident in their rhetoric before the visit. And many people were actually speculating whether, the Americans will balk and probably make some excuse and Nancy Pelosi will not go to Taiwan. But clearly the Americans have called the Chinese bluff. Does that mean that the Chinese will just do this pantomime act which they are doing right now and then, forget about it? I don't think so. I think the Chinese will try and push the envelope. They will try and retaliate in some other way, maybe not immediately, maybe in a couple of months, maybe in a couple of years. And that is something that the Americans will have to remain on guard. Not only the Americans, the Taiwanese, and perhaps all the countries around China, because that is how the Chinese, that's been like the Chinese standard operating procedure. Even when they have to back down, they come back in a sneaky, slimy, sinister way to attack to their adversaries. We've seen that with India. We've seen that in Doklam. We've seen that in Eastern Ladakh. And frankly, I think anybody who thinks that, okay, fine, we've beaten back the Chinese and there will be peace for all times to come. I think that's a mistake. Ideally, if you've beaten back the Chinese or you have stared them down, don't expect that the Chinese will not do anything. They might not do something immediately, but eventually they will try and even the scores. And that is what everybody needs to be looking out for.
Okay, so 2 questions for you there too. Firstly, if you could give us more context on President Xi Jinping's presidency. More specifically, what I want to know from you here is he has long said Taiwan is a top priority for him. But is that something we've just historically heard Chinese leaders say, or at this point do we take that claim in particular more seriously?
Look, I'll plead a certain amount of ignorance about Chinese internal politics because that is, those are Byzantine intrigues which happen in the Communist Party of China, and frankly, since I don't speak the language, that's something I avoid delving into, except for the fact, to the extent that there is a lot of talk of whether Xi Jinping, although he's extremely powerful right now, much more powerful than virtually all his predecessors, except for Deng Xiaoping and Mao. But even then, there are some reports. Now, we don't know how credible these reports are. We don't know whether there is disinformation and misinformation from the Western side. But there are reports that there are rumblings within the Communist Party, that there are people and factions within the Communist Party which are not very happy with the way Xi Jinping is trying to arrogate power, trying to emerge as some kind of a ruler of China, some kind of an emperor, new emperor, in China, violating all the set principles which had been put in place on how succession is going to take place. So there are rumblings. Now, whether those rumblings are going to get strengthened and going to become some kind of a move against Xi Jinping trying to extract a third term, we don't know. Will he try and bludgeon the opposition within the party to his rule? Probably he will. He has tried to eliminate all his rivals. And there are no clear identifiable rivals as of now. But the fact that there are now emerging problems within the Chinese economy, there are serious issues emerging as far as China's relations with the rest of the world are concerned. And there are reports of some serious internal unrest as well, partly because of the economy and partly because of other factors. Now, if all of these combine and, create some kind of a sentiment against Xi Jinping, it remains to be seen. But as of now, it seems that he has pretty much got the third term sealed and done and under his belt.
All right, Mr. Sareen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you so much for bringing us context. Part of why this story is so important is because of the larger geopolitical ramifications of the visit.